practice dying. Like if you're on your deathbed and you look back on your life, like what things would you be glad you did and what things would you wish that you did different?
It really does all come down to your priorities and what's the most important thing to you and what your non-negotiables are.
I don't need to be big shot real estate guy to like have meaning in life. If you want to have $100 million in revenue or something, like, well, why? You know, because like you're never going to be able to spend all that.
Like as very young kids, we lose ourselves and we just kind of fit into this dogma of whatever we're told we have to do or whatever we're rewarded for or whatever gets us the girl or the boy or the parents' appreciation. Some of us end up as adults and we just don't even know who the hell we are.
Like that's what you want as an entrepreneur, is to see exactly where you're going, but it can be murky. You just got to keep trying. Like don't give up.
It's crazy because most normal people will get rejected once, maybe twice, maybe 3 times.
Yeah.
And they're like, all right, I can't do it. It's impossible. That's just not reality. You have to do it 40 times and you're gonna have to do it 400 more times after that if you wanna continue to be successful, not just obtain the success, but keep it. Welcome back to the Hannah Hammond Show. I'm sitting here today in Michigan with Rob Walters, who is an absolute beast in commercial real estate development and specializes in single tenant net lease retail developments and has done over $500 million in development projects over the course of his career, and hundreds of transactions, and working with lots of the retailers across the country, from Aspen Dental to Montessori schools, a bunch of different retailers, and he'll get into all that. But we actually met through my business partner, Jeffrey, at HB Capital, who I know you guys have partnered on some deals in the past on, and I'm just excited to welcome you on the show today. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So I know we were talking a little bit offline, but what do we need to understand about your earliest days in life to understand how you got into commercial real estate development and then went on to become so massively successful in that space?
I mean, I guess I just start with, I think people always wonder, you know, was this something that sort of your family had, was given to you or something, versus did you figure this out on your own? And for myself, both my parents worked in education at a community college, so great upbringing, great parents, but you know, they weren't in business, they weren't in real estate. So it was little things. They were frugal. You know, when my friends would have starter jackets, I'd have like the Walmart version, and I never liked that. I always want to figure out like, how can I have the starter, you know, jacket version? So as early as 8th grade, I think I was getting the newspaper and looking at the stock ticker symbols and picking up books. You know, Robert Kiyosaki's a guy that I actually remember reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad relatively early in life. So I was curious, wanted to figure out how to make money, how to have more freedom as I grew up. So the path was very, you know, zigzag. It wasn't a straight line, but yeah, I looked for people in my life who had lives that I emulated, and you know, there's one particular father. It was a girl I actually dated's best friend's dad, who worked in real estate, and he would always be up at his lake house on Thursday night, and I'd often be there on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and I'd wake up Friday morning and see him jet skiing, and then he'd be at his desk and making phone calls and stuff, and I'm like, gosh, this is a guy that I'd like to meet. So I actually asked him to meet and tell me about his experience, and he explained that he got into student housing development, and you know, he made a great living for himself. So you know, there's a lot of things that went into it, but that piqued my interest in real estate. We can get more into this later, but I ended up going into the military, and I got done with basic training like 10 days before 9/11 happened. So I ended up getting deployed to Germany for a year with the Army and spent a lot of time there reading anything I could get my hands on that I thought would, you know, give me a leg up to try to make some money, not just through a big salary, but other ways of, you know, investing or passive income and whatnot. So I learned about fix and flipping and, you know, being a real estate agent and all these different things that gave me just a general understanding of different options for how to make money. But that kind of set the table for when I went to school. I got a finance degree. I started trading options. I got all my classes on Tuesday and Thursday, and I lived in a fraternity at the time. So the other 3 days a week, I would just sit, and I had a second room in the house, and I'd trade options. And that went well sometimes, went poorly others. I really thought I'd get a degree out of college, you know, with an investment bank or a trading company, but the Iraq War was going on. I could be deployed at any time with the military, so I had a really hard time figuring out, who was going to hire me. And then that's sort of when I had my one big lucky break, I think. I had a fraternity brother whose dad had a house in Key West, Florida, and my fraternity brother asked me if I wanted to go down and visit, and I did, and I spent a week down there, and his dad was there, and he was an accomplished real estate developer. And each day I'd wake up in the morning, go for a run, and read books. And he had an office that sat above the pool where I was out reading, and he saw me every morning, so it was like the second to last day. He just came up to me and he said, you're the kind of guy that I like to hire. You look like you're hardworking, you're inquisitive. Would you be interested in an interview? And I was like, sure. So I got home, I borrowed my dad's suit. It was way too big, and I went in literally the next day and had the interview with this guy and took a job with his real estate development company, which would have been, I think, 2004, and that really set the stage for kind of what was to come.
Yeah. And so it's so funny because as you were saying that, I had such a similar journey in growing up, had no money growing up. Dad worked at a pawn shop. Mom was a night shift grocery bagger. My best friend's dad was a luxury residential developer in high school, and they had like the life that I dreamed of, the opposite of the life that I had back at home. And so that was what kind of got me the bug and just started reading every book that I possibly could and learning fix and flip and wholesale and residential and commercial and all these different things. And then Rich Dad, Poor Dad with Robert Kiyosaki and all that. And so it's funny we had those similar paths. How old were you when you got offered the job for your friend's dad?
I would have been 21, I think, because I started college in 17. My mom put me in school at a private Christian school because she thought I needed to get going early. So when I went down to college, I was still 17 years old. I missed a year of college with the deployment with the Army, but I graduated in 3 years. So I think I was still 21 when I started that job. It was September of 24, yeah.
Were you a really good student in school, like an overachiever type your whole life, or no?
I was always a pretty good student. I mean, I wasn't the valedictorian, but I was definitely in the top tier. I was always in the, classes. I took 5 or 6 AP classes my senior year. I think that helped me to graduate in 3 years. But I always had a little bit of a contrarian tilt where I didn't want that to be my identity. I didn't want to be a smart kid. So going in the Army, I think, had a lot to do with that. I had friends who were going to some prestigious schools, even though I grew up in a town that didn't necessarily send that many kids to Ivy Leagues. I had a friend who was going to Harvard. And just even from that point in my life, I was I don't want to get into the game of just having to do things the way I'm supposed to. So yes, I did well in school. I think, I was smart, whatever that means. I think there's so many ways you can be smart. But I was always looking for another route than just the typical path.
Yeah. And is that what drove you? I mean, you kind of mentioned that, but is that the main thing that drove you to get into the Army? Or what was the reasoning behind that? Because it's such a contrast with being super smart and studying and reading and all these things.
Yeah. No, I had actually skipped AP Bio, so that was right after lunch in high school, and I went to Taco Bell, and there was a armory nearby, and I just walked in and was tell me a little bit about, this. And these recruiters are very good salespeople. So he kind of got his, hook in me and explained, hey, we can pay for your school. And even beyond that, you'll have some money when you're going to school and these different things. And I had one kid who lived 2 houses down from me who was similar to me, that he was really good at soccer and he was pretty good at school. And he went into the Marines. And I actually thought it was the craziest thing, what a terrible idea in my head. But I think the fact that he did it, it was man, I'll have this experience and, maybe it'll change me. So there was no real well thought out part of it. I mean, my parents actually were please don't do this. I needed them to sign off because I was only 17. And I said, I think I'm going to do this. And, finally they came around and signed off. So the Army piece, other than I think I did have some of these financial principles in my head of hey, if I don't have to, take out debt, or I don't have to have a job when I'm going to school, that'll help. I think had part of it to do with the military, but the other part was just, I think, my contrarian nature of all right, these people are doing this, I'm going to do something totally out of left field and go into the Army.
Yeah.
So that's what I did.
And how was that experience for you? And do you think that shaped you for what you then went on to do when you got out?
For the most part, I hated it. Like, I just didn't enjoy it. I don't love being told what to do in general. I tried to learn how to
Yeah.
be told, like my wife often, can you take out the garbage? And it's like, okay, yes, I can do that. Like, I don't have to be so prickly on every request of my time. But 9 weeks of basic training in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri in the middle of January, it toughens you up, like you'd have to get up every morning at 3:30 and go running, even though it was 10 degrees out. And so I think that caused me a little bit to believe in myself more, believe I could do things that maybe I wouldn't have otherwise thought I could do. But in no way was I excelling or really into it or kind of a, hoorah person. But then it gave me also this time, like I said, when I was deployed in Germany and before that. So you go to basic training and then you do training where you learn your job skills. So mine was going to be a signal system support specialist, which essentially was like a communications radio guy, which I had no interest in at all. So most of the time I went down to Fort Gordon in Augusta, Georgia for 20 weeks. And I started reading, and on the weekends, I remember the first weekend we were able to leave post. Everybody went and rented a hotel room for $40 and got a case of Bud Light and a bunch of Taco Bell and just got drunk and ate the food in this hotel room. And I did it the first weekend. I'm just like, this is stupid. This isn't fun. So I started staying on base and running. And to this day, I run a lot. But in reading, and when I got deployed to Germany, I was out 12 hours a night guarding posts. And I would sit out there and have German flashcards, or I'd try to read a book while I was doing this. So, it created a lot of principles in me that I think helped me to have success later in life. And in particular, I'll never forget when I got out of the advanced training in Georgia and I finally had free time. I woke up and I realized nobody was going to tell me what to do that day. And I was so thrilled, but I didn't want to waste any minute, So I was very productive, almost too much so, where I feel I needed to chill out a little bit and enjoy life. But at that age, I think those are the kind of things you need to be doing, is taking things seriously, using your time effectively, putting your time towards the goals you have. So I think that's probably the piece of my military experience that was most pertinent to my success later in life.
Wait, so you got out of the military, and then after that, you actually, did you finish your finance degree and then go to the military? And
No,
then come back?
well, it's confusing because it was the reserves program. So it wasn't go for 4 years straight.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be, and prior to 9/11, it was essentially the way it had been since the Vietnam War. You went and you did a weekend of training somewhere, and then your other 3 weekends you had to be at school or whatever you might do. And then during the summer, you'd go for a couple weeks of training. So that's what I was intending to do. And then 9/11 happened, we got deployed. I ended up actually then signing up for officer candidate school, which, is the process to become an officer in the Army, as opposed to being on the enlisted side. And that was an 18-month program that I had to do on the weekends while I was going to school at the University of Illinois. The reason I bring that up is because during that time, my unit actually got deployed again to Afghanistan, but I wasn't able to go because I was in this program. And, I think that would have made me a totally different person than what I went through in Germany, which was quite safe and, not traumatic. The Army was an 8-year commitment from when I was 17 to 27, but most of the time I was able to continue on with my everyday life. So I finished up school at the University of Illinois in 2004 and started working. And while I was working, I had to go do these weekends away and stuff. And it was a tremendous amount of stress because I constantly thought I was going to be deployed on a dime to Iraq or these different places. So, trying to get your career going while every time you'd hear of some new thing in the news, you were afraid I might, have to disappear for a year was not the easiest way to get started.
Yeah, always a open tab in the back of your mind, what if I get taken tomorrow and who knows what's going to happen after that. Okay, so then you got offered a job by your buddy's father in
Yep.
Florida at the house in Key West, who sounds like was living a pretty good life.
Yep.
And then walk us through that process. What was that experience like for you as you were starting to learn? Because then you ultimately went on to start your own development company. So what you said you were hired as a dirt dog. What is a dirt dog?
So a dirt dog, to me, was just, I guess, to set the scene for the answer. This company did a lot of things, but primarily, at least what they had a ton of their growth was doing build-to-suit development. So what that is, at least when I'm using that terminology, is you have a tenant kind of in hand when you're going to look for a project who wants to occupy space. So, you could do a build to suit in the industrial space for Amazon to put in their, for a warehouse, but you could also do it for Chipotle for the restaurant, or it could be a doctor who wants you to build a building for their designs. But, you're doing your development with a specific tenant in mind. So that's what this developer had done with Blockbuster Video back in the 90s, like did hundreds of them. So at the time that I came on, they didn't really have a ton of those types of tenants, but they, for example, the one that they had at the time, and it's funny, we're sitting in suburban Detroit, it was called Murray's Discount Auto. They were actually based here, and they ended up getting bought out by O'Reilly's. But I would drive around suburban Chicago where they had given us targets of where they wanted to open, and I would, over time learn what they were looking for, and then it's funny how this has evolved with technology, but at the time it would be like, I would take a picture of a property, and if there wasn't a sign on it, I'd go to the recorder's office and look at the plat map and get the PIN number, and then I'd go to like the treasurer's office and I'd give them the PIN, and they'd tell me, here's the tax bill, and then I'd research who owned it, and I'd try to call them and see if I could buy it. Obviously, some properties were on the market, and it was just a matter of calling on a sign. But that's what I spent the first, year and a half doing, is just driving around and looking at property and then calling to see if you could buy it, and if so, for how much. And from that point, learning how to negotiate a purchase proposal and a purchase contract. But what sort of happened at the same time is my now partner, Mike, and I, we sort of teamed up, even working at this company, Insight, that's where we met. Just saw that we needed to find our own tenants to be able to like have the process more in our own court. Like, we didn't want to have to wait for somebody else at the company to come along and say, hey, we have this new client, now you go find the real estate. Mm-hmm. So we just started driving around the country on our own, and while we were doing that, we'd look up like who are the best real estate brokerage companies in this town, and we'd try to set up a lunch with them. Or if there was a conference going on, we'd go to that conference and try to meet people and just network and grow our network that way. As that happened, we began to not just be looking for dirt, but we'd be looking for the tenant that might create that relationship, take them to a dinner, whatever it might be. The first development project I ever put together was in my hometown. It was a corner. We thought we could do a drugstore, and you needed this tire store on the corner, and I couldn't get a hold of the people. Finally, I remember driving out to their house and knocking on the door late at night, and they were like, we're never selling the property. So we pivoted, and I put together a site plan that showed 2 little retail buildings, and I called the guy from Chipotle. This is back when they probably had like 80 locations. And we had lunch, and he's like, I want to be there. I'll pay you this much in rent. And my eyes are getting all excited, like maybe I have my first development deal. And that was it. We did that deal. We put in Potbelly sandwiches and Starbucks. And so from that point on, things started to grow where Mike and I, would ask the Chipotle guy, well, hey, we put you there. What about this other town? Could we help you find you there? And we just pieced things together. I think during the time there, we did about 14 projects. We ended up finding a dental group. There were some guys that used to work at Aspen Dental, which is a large chain of dentistry across the country, and they had started their own company. And this was part of what we did. Like, we were in Willoughby, Ohio, suburban Cleveland, and we saw Allcare Dental. And so we just figured out who the owner of Allcare Dental was, and we called, and we're like, hey, do you need build-to-suit development services? And 6 months later, that guy called us back, and we ended up doing a few projects for them. And so when we finally did go to leave and start our own company, they did their first few projects with us.
Nice. Sort
of the transition.
And is that company that you started at still around, or did they retire?
No, they're still around.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. They're like a competitor of ours. They've shifted some of their focus towards like large industrial projects. Mm-hmm. They actually own, I think, like a 2 or 3 million square foot building really close to here in Ypsilanti that's leased to GM.
Did they get upset when you left? I always think it's fascinating because I've helped 2 people because I own a real estate brokerage as well as the lending company, but I've helped 2 people start their own brokerages from my company, like help, support them, teach them everything I did, like give them the systems, teach them like the ropes and everything. And, but then I hear all these stories and it's sometimes not so smooth like that. Like a lot of men in the industry, they get very mad or make threats. I know Simon was talking about he was getting threatened when he was going to go move to a different company or things like that. So like, what did that look like for you?
More like Simon, unfortunately. We had a 1-year non-compete that we'd signed when we started, which, I was 21 years old. I had no authority. Whether it would have held up, I don't know. But it was something we took seriously because, as I've learned more over the years, you get in a lawsuit, it's going to cost you a lot of money, whether you did anything wrong or not. So we waited a year before we did much of anything. But like, for one example, during that year period, I went to the International Council of Shopping Centers National Convention in Las Vegas, and I had helped my, at the time, roommate get a job at this company, and he was there, and I had left. And he said that my boss, former boss, the guy who owned the company, had asked him for my address because he was going to send a cease and desist letter because he saw us talking to Panda Express or something. You know, at the time, like my heart rate got going, and but yeah, unfortunately, afterwards we got together, me and the owner of that company, and it was in person, like a very positive. You know, had drinks and stuff, but unfortunately, he did some things after that in terms of kind of like telling his company go after the competitors or clients I'd mentioned that we were working on and stuff. So from that point forward, you know, there hasn't unfortunately been that much of a relationship. But teach their own, you know, like he's, I guess, protecting his business, I guess what he thinks he's doing. For me personally, we have a lot of guys in their 20s working for us now. If any of them ever want to go off and do this on their own, I would, you know, if they do it in a thoughtful, respectful way, I would 100% support them and take it as a, you know, badge of pride that, hey, look, like we were able to help create more success rather than there's some limited pie that, you know, if somebody takes out of it, I don't get as much pie. I don't believe in that way of thinking.
Yeah, I'm the same way. It's just that scarcity mindset versus the abundance mindset. And I think instinctively and culturally, we are trained. I mean, I guess everybody has a different family, but people like you and me who didn't come from much, we kind of have that scarcity mindset ingrained. And so for me, it was a shift to that abundance mindset of like, for me to win doesn't mean somebody else has to lose, right? And it might be, sure, I won that deal and they lost that deal, but they're not losing the game. Right. It's just that one play. Right. And that's how you learn and you grow. And there's so much abundance in the world that there's more businesses being created all the time. Like I just think that it's so silly for people to hate each other and make these massive, you know, ruin really great relationships because they feel like it's a zero-sum game. But
yeah, I don't, at the end of the day, believe that it's in my best interest either. I mean, like, obviously I want it to be better for these other people, like in an altruistic way, but I've thought about it a lot, and I think it's better for me to have more people out there who are like, wow, thanks for what you did. It's, you know, for reputationally, whatever. Like I mentioned what I just mentioned, it'll be heard by whoever's heard. I didn't get into details, but still, like, that doesn't look well on, you know, my old boss, like that I'm describing it this way versus if I would have been able to describe it some other way, I could probably also mention his name and the company, and it would be like a plug for them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But so
people,
But it's also just the way that I live my life is I want to be able to do the things that I like to do. And you know, I moved to Manhattan. It's expensive. I never thought I'd spend as much as I do in a year as I do now. But I don't buy status symbols. Like I'm not into like just getting stuff to show like how well I've done or to boost my ego. It's like if I've got enough money to do what I enjoy in a given year and the next year, then that's all I need. So yeah, if an employee of mine left and did something that would jeopardize like my business and my ability to like, you know, live, that might be one thing, but I don't think that's going to happen. So to your point, I think you can, you know, grow the pie by sharing and helping.
So you were getting started in the boom in like 2004, 2005, 2006, that kind of era. And then you went out and started your own company. And then I'm pretty sure pretty shortly after that, like within a year, that was where the market crash was starting to take place. And then I know you had some tenants or equity partners that filed bankruptcy. So can you walk us through that process? I mean, as an early entrepreneur, you're super excited. Like you have that. I actually just finished a book by a friend of mine, Cameron Harold, called Double Double. But he says there's 4 stages of entrepreneurship. And the first one is uninformed optimism, where you go out and you're just like so excited to take it on and like you're unstoppable. You're going to own the world. You got it all. And then the next phase is informed pessimism, where you're like, I can't do this. I'm in over my head. I'm going to lose everything. Like, how do I move forward from here? So and then paired with the economic environment that we were in, I'm sure you had some pretty severe experiences in those 2 phases. So like, what was it like for you launching the company in a peak market that was crazy, and then, you know, going through some of those dark times shortly thereafter?
It was rough. Those first 2 stages you mentioned fit the situation perfectly, because part of the reason we left, because it just, everything seemed so easy. Like, the idea of getting money for a project at the time in 2006, I didn't handle that at my previous company. There was somebody else who like did the financing and stuff, but it just felt so easy. Like, you come up with an idea, you go out there, you get the money, and you build it. So that certainly informed my decision to do this in the first place, was like the times we were in. But I left in March of 2007, I think April. And like I said, we had that 1-year non-compete. So our first real like work was being done like April 2008. During that year, I had driven all across the country and looked at real estate. I mean, that was one thing that I think led to our success, is we would get in the car and do 3,000 miles in 4 days. Like, we just...
Are you sure you didn't run?
I wasn't as good of a runner then. I'm sure I did plenty of running, but yeah, not 3,000 miles. 3,000 miles is about the annual mileage I do, but not in a week.
That's insane.
Yeah.
I know, for those of you who don't know, because I didn't mention it, but he's ran 25 marathons and 4 New York marathons, and had a personal best last year of 2 hours and 46 minutes and 17 seconds.
Oh, wow. You did your research.
I have
That's
a
good.
photographic
Yes.
memory
All right.
too. But yeah, that's crazy. I run like, to get my food from the DoorDash driver, and I'm winded. So
No, it's a bit of a neurosis, which I think, can benefit me in a lot. Like, I'm sure you've had a lot of people on, and sometimes people who have success in different areas can be like hyper focused on things, and running's one of those things for
not
me.
sometimes.
Yeah, a lot of times.
Yeah.
But no, like, so I'll never forget it. We had a couple projects sort of then, like sites, pieces of real estate in Tennessee that we thought would be our first development projects. And once the non-compete was out, we put offers on them, and we went out to get financing. And at that time, everything still felt kind of fine. In hindsight, like the early 2008, things were falling apart, but at the time it felt fine. So we had a term sheet from, I think it was BB&T, and then I get a call like, 6 weeks into the underwriting, like, we can't do this deal. And I was like, okay. We went to another regional bank. Oh yeah, we're good to go. They did the appraisal, came back, and then it was like a couple weeks out from closing, and they pulled back on the deal. And this is when I think you start hearing, Lehman Brothers is collapsing, and these are all things that at the time I didn't, I wasn't smart enough or in the know to know what was going on around me, but like, you could feel this isn't going in the right direction. And so we got serious, and we drove down to Tennessee, and we set up meetings with, I think, like 40 banks.
Jeez.
And we just drove from like Kingsport over on the east side to like Memphis, and like any, Knoxville, Chattanooga, we just met with banks. And we were striking out left and right, and I'm like, oh my God, this might not work, like this whole thing. And we ended up going to Clayton Bank and Trust in Knoxville for the last one. And there's like a loan officer, he's probably in his 20s. And then 5 minutes later, this old guy comes in, and he's got 2 books in his hand, thick books. And he signs them and hands them. He's like, I'm Jim Clayton, founder, CEO of Clayton Bank. And I was like, oh, all right. He's like, tell me what you got going on. We told him. He's like, you guys seem like good guys. Yeah, we'll lend you the money. And we're like, okay. So I went home, read his book, and the guy's a billionaire. He grew up in West Tennessee as a sharecropper's son, and started some car dealerships, and then a manufactured housing business. He sold it to Warren Buffett, Berkshire Hathaway, for like $1 billion plus. And then he started this bank, and every dollar he got from the bank, he donated back to the community. Wow. So I'll never forget, because it was the day I was supposed to leave for my honeymoon. I get in the sellers on the properties, there's 3 of them that we were working on. We're all getting fed up. They were like, we'd gotten extensions, and they're like, this is it. We're not giving you any more time. And the call, I'm in Oklahoma City, and the call is like, I'm about to fly home to then fly to my honeymoon, and it's like, oh, Rob, we effed up, man. I don't think I can do your deal anymore. And, like I couldn't believe it. So my partner, Mike, got Jim Clayton's business card out, and he had his phone number on. He called him, and Jim picks up. It was his cell phone. He was in Las Vegas at some convention. And he's like, wait, what? No, I'll take care of this. And then 5 minutes later, I get a call back from my loan officer, like, okay, we're good to go. And we closed those loans and sold them. So, there was definitely a lesson in like perseverance and not assuming that things were just going to go well there. But yeah, then beyond that, like the tenant that we built for those first 3 projects for ended up going bankrupt. luckily I hate it when this happens because somebody else is sort of left holding the bag, but we had sold the 3 properties, so it didn't like take us down completely there. And when I go look at those 3 properties now, they're well leased to other tenants. So I'm hoping, I know for a fact one of the people that we sold the property to, even though the tenant had closed and gone bankrupt, ended up being our equity partner on one of our first projects after that, as we were trying to figure out. Because yes, at that time period also, the equity partner that was going to write the equity checks for our projects went bankrupt. So we literally then in 2009, we're back to like complete ground zero with no tenant, no money, no idea really what we were doing. But we kept, we put our head down and it was like, hey, what's our other choice? Like go back to work for somebody? So we pieced together a project with Aspen Dental with some of the work we'd done for this other dental group. We had a property in Cheektowaga, New York, which is suburban Buffalo, that we had leased to Chipotle and Aspen Dental. Despite the fact that we had 2 10-year leases, it was like 11% yield on cost on the project, which today is like impossible to get on a retail project. We could not get a bank to lend us money on it. So it was tough, but it was one of these like, all right, how do we find money? And I was sitting at a CCIM luncheon, and there was a broker who like sells investment sales properties. And he was like, hey, can I sell any of your projects? And we were like, hey, we don't really have anything to sell, but we need help raising money. He was, probably 20 years older than us. And he set us up with 5 individuals who may have had interest in investing in real estate. And the first 4 like laughed us out of the room. And the last one didn't show up, but we called him and he invited us over to his house, and we go over and his dogs are like accosting us while we're trying to explain to him what we're doing. And he's like, all right, tomorrow why don't you come back with, and I'll bring my high school friend and we'll have the lunch we were supposed to have. And we had that lunch. And they wrote a check on that project in Cheektowaga, New York. And then they ended up doing like 40, 45 projects with us. We're still doing some stuff with them today. So
Wow.
sometimes when you don't have the path, like that's what you want as an entrepreneur, is to see exactly where you're going, but it can be murky, and you just got to keep, trying. Like, don't give up.
Yeah, I mean, that's a testament to your resilience. Is like 40 banks.
Right.
You went to 40 banks. You must have not had Jeffrey at that time. No, but yeah, it's crazy because most normal people will get rejected once, maybe twice, maybe 3 times.
Yeah.
And they're like, all right, I can't do it. It's impossible, right? And so it's just, that's just not reality. You have to do it 40 times, and you're going to have to do it 400 more times after that if you want to continue to be successful, not just obtain the success, but keep it.
Right.
So that's really cool. Yeah, and I think I was talking to Simon about this too. Is like the one trait I see in every super successful person, and not just financial success, but health. Like you have an amazing marriage, you have amazing kids, you have a great relationship with your family. Like you run 3,000 miles a year, which I want to talk to you about because I don't know how, I still haven't found that balance of like, making time for some other things in life outside of business. And then you have this incredible development company and an amazing reputation and all these things. And that's really hard to do. And it takes insane dedication. And that one trait that I recognize in the people that are able to accomplish success in all the areas of their life, and be a very well-rounded and successful person in every right, is that they are just insanely driven and determined and resilient. And that's really all that it comes down to, is like they just don't quit.
Yeah. No, and it's, I do think there's an aspect to it when you have to know when something's not going to work. And I think like if Clayton Bank would have been my 40th no, that might have been it, because like we had pulled up all the banks, and maybe there would have been other opportunities or whatever, but there is some level where you have to realize like, all right, this isn't my day, but until you know that that's the point, you've assessed like, here are all the options, here's all the things I can do. And it's funny, if we talk about running, like I have a very similar history with my running and getting from like a dark time to a successful time, and kind of assessing like, what can I do to make this work?
Can you share that?
Well, yeah, I wanted to run. I love running. I probably loved running even more back then because we were always traveling. It's not fun to get up in a hotel room every morning and just get in a car and like not see the cool city you might be in. It might be a city that nobody thinks is interesting, like, Waterloo, Iowa or something, and you're in a Fairfield Inn by the mall. But like if you wake up and you go find a little trail along the river or go through their downtown, like it's cool. You kind of know that place. And so I was doing that across the country, but I continually was getting hurt. Like it was just one thing after another. and not like catastrophic stuff like torn ACLs, just tendonitis, stress fractures, stuff like that. And so, I mean, I had, thousands of dollars worth of contraptions I bought to, massage and stretch and all these books and changing my form and all these different things. And I kept, like, I wanted to run more because I knew to be the runner I wanted to be. Like, I had to be able to do it kind of more. And then I just wanted to do it when I was on all these trips. And I couldn't, and it was frustrating until I found finally a running coach, and he videotaped me running for a minute, and he's like, your left arm is doing something different than your right arm. That's what your problems are. So now I'm running around the track, he's yelling, move your left arm, and I start moving my left arm, and like the pain starts going away in my right knee. I mean, it sounds like magic, but it was true. I was like, wow, maybe I finally found, my thing. Like, a running coach was kind of on the end of my list of like options for all this stuff. And so from that point on, I really didn't have as many injuries. And then he told me about this function, and I'll try not to be too technical on it, but there's a ground contact time balance feature on the advanced Garmin's that tells you the amount of time your left foot and your right foot spend on the ground as a percentage of each other. So like if you're 50-50, it's like perfect, but it also means you're probably landing right under your center of like mass. And if you start getting to like 51, 52, it probably means one of your feet is landing out front of the other, maybe crossing over the other. So when I learned that and I got it, I watched that the entire time I run, not like incessantly, but I keep looking down and making sure the whole time I'm running, I'm at like 50-50. That's probably 10, 12 years ago. And since then, like, I've been able to pretty much run as much as I want. Wow. Because it was the data that gave me the feedback on the things like, hey, your left arm's doing something different. Because otherwise, I could only really tell when that coach was there telling me, and now I have this like thing on my arm that allows me to. So that was kind of like my Clayton Bank of running,
Yeah, because most people probably would have been like, I can't run.
Right.
I get injured.
I get
I'm
hurt all
not
the
meant
time.
for
Exactly.
it.
Yep.
Exactly. Which is probably something I would have said as
Yeah.
an easy excuse out, but that's cool. And I could see you light up just talking about running. So it's clearly something that you're super passionate about. And you found that passion in the Army. That's where it started?
Yeah, I mean, because it was, maybe I'm remembering it wrong because it was a somewhat long time ago now, but I remember it as being like one weekend, like hungover in a dark hotel room in a terrible southern town. And the next weekend, I'm like, it's sunny and I'm like feeling good and I'm like running, and then went back to my barracks and got a nice healthy meal, and like the contrast in how I felt between the two was significant. And I'd ran a little bit before that. In baseball, I was always one of the third slowest people getting to first base. It's funny, I had my 25-year high school reunion 2 weeks ago, and these two other guys who were the slowest were there, and they said, I always thought you might be a distance runner because like when we had to run 3 miles, you were always the first person done. Like, it's just the problem is the speed running to first base was the same speed that you ran for 3 miles, which is probably the same speed you run now for like 26 miles. And there's a lot of truth in that. So I would go running a little bit in high school, different things. But it was really, in the Army where I did like 6 miles. And I felt like, okay, like, that was fun. And then I think it was my junior year in college. I had gone like a 9-month period without drinking. I had this agreement with my brother about it. And I'm living in a fraternity at the University of Illinois. So not drinking was a very weird thing to be doing. But a girl that I knew and 13 of her sorority sisters were running the Chicago Marathon. This was 2003. And so I signed up, and I did my first marathon in 2003, caught the bug, and, continued running on and off since that time. But like I said, injuries were a lot of the problem. Like, I did that one marathon, I didn't for a while. Then I finally did another marathon. I did my third one in Nairobi, Kenya. We went and, raised a bunch of money for like these water projects, and we got to go meet the kids and different things. And then, the last 12 years, I've just, every spring and fall. My big goal was always to run the Boston Marathon, and it felt very out of reach. I got in a couple times, but then they seed you, and if there's too many runners who are faster than you, you get out, you're on the outside. That happened to me with 9 seconds and then like 11 seconds. But I took my time from 3:42 to finally 2:47, and last year 2:46, which has allowed me to run the Boston Marathon the last 4 years. And my point being, the lighting up, it's fun to accomplish goals. It's fun to have things that you couldn't do that now you can do and look back. I mean, you start to take them for granted, but when you have an opportunity like this to kind of think about it, it's like, wow, that is really cool. Like, I remember thinking to myself, man, when my dad sees me finally qualify for the Boston Marathon, like I'll cry because I'll be so emotional. And then I have a video that he took of me like crossing the finish line in Minneapolis the first time I ran under 3 hours, and you can hear in his voice like he's choking up and stuff, you know. So it's like, I don't know. I think that's what life's all about. So
Yeah, that's so cool. How do you balance everything? You know, what are your habits, or like how have you managed to balance that? Because I know personally in my life I've always been a little bit out of whack, definitely leaning heavily on the academics, business, real estate, like, you know, as that's progressed, as I've aged, and then my relationships and my health have suffered more. I mean, I've kept it up decently, but you know, I'm single, don't have a very strong relationship, and I don't work out I mean, I go to the gym when I'm at home, but I travel all the time, and then I lose my routine, or I go out to eat all the time. So like, how have you balanced your crazy drive in real estate development, and then also running and being an athlete, and then having an amazing relationship with your family and your kids as well? Because I feel like I don't know how to find enough time in the day, and even with a team, you know, so like walk me through how you've managed to be successful at that, whether it's how you built your team or your daily habits or your non-negotiables, or what that looks like in your life.
it's just funny you asked that, because literally this week I keep like an Insta story most days with something, and I get into a lot of different things. So I got a question from, like, I think it was a mom of kids' previous school, was like, I don't understand how you have time for all of this. And so I thought about it a little bit, so it gives me a little bit of a head start on your question. But I mean, part of it is like I put in more of the hours like in my 20s. Like I didn't go out partying as much and stuff like when I was in my 20s as maybe some other peers. And I took, you know, risks. Like starting a company when you're 24, it just gives you that time to like learn, and the time value of money and all these different things that my point being now, like I do live a pretty balanced life. But I think if I would have not put in maybe some of the front loading in my earlier years, you know, maybe I wouldn't be having this opportunity now. I think another one is, and I don't know, I wonder if I wouldn't have been diagnosed with like ADD, now learning more about it, or ADHD. If I get into something, I get really into it, but like trying to get me into something that like my brain hasn't said it's into, it's like impossible. So I don't get sidetracked with a lot of things. Like I don't watch TV much. I don't like to go out with like the guys on the block to sit on the stoop and just chat. I don't, there's a lot of things that I think, you know, most people do in a given day that I just don't do. So saying no to things I think helps. And then like as I've gotten older and with business and I think this is just key, and especially for any entrepreneurs, like figuring out how to go from being the company, yourself, to the company being like all the different people. And I realize I can't do all these things that I used to do. So, you know, when we finally brought on like a bookkeeper and I stopped literally writing, you know, the checks, like, and doing QuickBooks. And then when we brought on young guys to make the calls to the property owners that I used to do, I like no longer will do that anymore, you know? And, I don't do anything on the construction side of our business really, because it's not what I'm good at. So I try to focus my time on what I'm good at in work. And then like, what do I value outside of work, and how much do I value it? Because you show what you value by what you put your time into. I'm thankful, like my wife, since we had our first kid, she worked for us for like a year until she got pregnant, but she hasn't worked, so she's had more time to, you know, kind of take care of a lot of things in the house that maybe I would have to if we both worked, that kind of thing. With running, like it's just my top priority in a day. Like, you know, if you would ask me to do this and I looked at my schedule and it was like, there's not time to run, I'd be like, I don't have time to do it. Where I think most people are like, it's the first, like working out is the first thing to kind of go, you know? And then like with the family, it's just trying to make those times count. Like my older daughter and I like to go to concerts. So we have like kind of big, you know, memory things. My younger one has started to get into running, so she did a 10K recently that I did with her. And like, you know, it's just kind of like those big memorable moments instead of maybe just like a lot of time sitting on the couch watching TV with them or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think like in short, it's, I think for me, I had to decide what I value, figuring out how to get time in my life for it, and then saying no to things that would take up that time otherwise. And, I moved to New York 4 years ago on a whim. And that's helped a lot because all the things that I might have had, little meetings I'd have for this group or that, it all went away, and I could rebuild from scratch, what I wanted to do. And I have very few things that are weekly occurrences that I'm committed to and stuff because I don't like them that much. Then you can't have the spontaneity to do other things. So.
Yeah, it really does all come down to your priorities and what's the most important thing to you and what your non-negotiables are. Like you said, for me, work is my number one priority. And so everything kind of comes as a second or third or fourth or fifth to business. And so I need to have a self-reflection on do I want that to always be my number one priority? But I'm also at a different phase in my life. I believe you can have it all, but not all at once. And just like you said, you really put in the work when you were getting started earlier on. And then now you've built a huge foundation and you have a great team, and you can settle into more of a balance in your life. And that's really cool. And I love that you said that you love to dance and that you go dancing out, and house music's my favorite music too. And I had my friend Garen Jones on the podcast, and he's just a beautiful human, but spent a lot of time in prison and had a lot of challenges growing up. And he teaches people, because so many people, he works with a lot of entrepreneurs that are very successful financially, but they're very unfulfilled and kind of miserable inside, a lot of them. And he teaches people to go back to the things that lit them up as a kid. And so he asked me on the show, what lit you up as a child, and go back to do that. And he shared an example of one of his clients who was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And she's like, I'm just, on paper I have it all, but I just feel miserable inside. And he's like, well, what did you enjoy as a kid? And she's like, I love dancing. And she just lit up saying it, I love to dance. And so she started prioritizing dancing over anything else in business or scaling or anything like that. And just that thing, playing and going back to that childhood instinct of just fun, was able to kind of turn her life around. So I think it's really cool that you shared that you like to dance and you'll stay up all night dancing in Brooklyn. So can you talk a little bit about how you figured that out or started doing that?
Yeah, I think there's so many angles to it, but I think the starting point being I used to have season tickets to, the Chicago Bulls and the Chicago Bears, and I spent a ton of time doing this stuff. Sometimes it would be client facing stuff, whatever. But, and then I'd listen to the talk radio on the way to work, and but I knew everything, and I could have these conversations with people about, sports, and it was just part of my life. And I think when COVID hit, and, a little bit leading up to that, it was just started questioning it, because, 8 out of 10 times you go to a game, and it's kind of boring. Your team gets blown out or they blow the other team out. It's 1 in 10 times there's this amazing ending and I think what draws people to sports is it's that collective feeling of these people are on my team, and we all did something together, even though you didn't have anything to do with it, right? But that's what people are seeking out, I think, in that environment. But in sports, despite the fact that it's only some of the times, you're going to get the outcome you want, there's also always the enemy, the opposition, the other team. And so, I'd find myself leaving a game and hating people from Wisconsin because the Packers won. And it's to me, this just feels very unevolved as a human being, because they live on the other, they this other, they're rooting for these grown men, playing. It just didn't make that much sense. And so I, had a couple experiences with electronic music. I went to one, ICSC was a beach party thing, and I had a lot of fun. And then that led me to go to a festival in Chicago just for a night. But it was really and then when I moved to New York after COVID, I told myself I want to see more live music. That's something I was into when I was a kid, and then when I was a kid, and I just totally didn't make time for music at all. But then my brother, he's 6 years younger than me, and he lives in the Chicagoland area, and I had moved to New York, and I think he was really disappointed about the fact that I had this distance that felt it was never going to be changed. And I said, man, it's New York. And he's a musician. He's really good at the guitar, singing, drums, all this stuff. And so I was come to New York. I'll pay for us to go see whatever, a concert, anytime. And he's I'd love that. So I Googled concerts, NYC, and it was Fish at the Madison Square Garden. And I was I kind of remember the band Fish from when I was in high school. I was like, what about this to my brother? And he was like, that would be amazing. So we went, and it's a long story, but it's a culture that is very open to like whatever you bring into it is going to be like accepted. And the more you're yourself, the more you're kind of accepted, you know? And I think even that first show, I felt that a little bit. I've now seen them 48 times in the last 2.5 years.
Oh my God.
So, yeah, I think my wife would be like, you know, you were saying priorities and time spent, like maybe
Yeah.
fish is your top priority in life. But like I learned then to move my body in ways that felt really good, and I didn't care anymore. You know, like I think growing up, I wanted to be cool. Like I really wanted to be cool. I think about that a lot now, and I never thought I was. And dancing was something I think I always wanted to do, but like I was afraid that I didn't look cool doing it. And so now I finally have this like community that I think allowed me to feel like maybe not that I was cool, but that it was like okay. And so from there, yeah, I actually met a guy at the Sphere, the venue in Vegas. I was seeing Fish on the floor where it's general admission, and started talking to the guy behind me. And he's a DJ, and he owns a really prominent nightclub in Ridgewood, which is on the Brooklyn-Queens border. And so I went and saw him DJ one time, and then I've been to his club a bunch of times, and now it's just grown. I started taking a house dance class on Fridays in the East Village from like 11:30 to 1, and I'm by far the worst every time. But then like so the difference, I think, when you get into, especially like house music, you know, plur, peace, love, unity, respect, like it's kind of the opposite of like sports where like there's no enemy, there's no like anybody who's there, as long as they're like being respectful is, you know, like the energy is to build those people up and stuff.
Yeah, it's like an energy of love.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, and it feels good, and it feels good to move my body. I took 75,000 steps one night when I was out dancing. So I just like keep moving, keep going. And now it's like become like really like a study in humanity too, because like while I'm there, you can see other people who don't look as comfortable. Maybe it's their first time. Maybe they're, you know, overweight. They don't like, you can tell they don't like what they're wearing or whatever. And I'll just go up and make like little comments like, hey, I like your moves. Hey, you got great energy or whatever. And then you see people's faces like kind of like brighten up. And it's amazing how you can make somebody's day, you know, that way. And I'm able to do that like when I'm out dancing. Like a very quick side note on that, just because I think it's very important in how I live my life, is one of these, a woman that I met at the women's shelter that I was referring to earlier. We started going out for drinks like once a month, and one of the times, you know, she told me that of all these terrible things that happened to her family, that she was like the only one left, like she didn't have any family. And she said to me one time that, you know, when I wake up, sometimes I really don't want to wake up, like I don't want to go to dialysis, I just want to die, but I remember that you would know that I'm alive, that there's like one person out there like thinking about me. And I mean, how powerful is that? Like, right? Like there's somebody out there that like, because you're having, and you know, she's never the top priority of my life. She didn't get a ton of my time, just a little bit of time. And like she was saying that made her want to wake up in the morning. So I just think about that when I'm out dancing too. Like there might be somebody in here who feels, you know, same way, like, or whatever. And then you have like an interaction and you're just kind of kind. And nobody cares how much money you have in that scenario. Nobody cares any of that stuff. It doesn't matter. Yeah. Which I hate that stuff. You got to come in like, this is who I am first and now I'm important, you know, rather than like you just show up as who you are. If people figure these things out about you later on, like, so be it. So, yeah, that's, there's a lot to talk about on that, but I'm really enjoying it. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, I think, and, you know, now the self-actualization and, I don't know, exploring more authenticity in who you are, and obviously now it just, the authenticity thing is becoming a more important piece of society, and I think historically, society was just very traumatic in nature, just the way we were raised. I mean, at least speaking for the United States or whatever, our culture, just the way you're raised, like fit in this box, do this, obey this, follow these rules, don't do this, don't be that. And then I think we just lose ourselves. Like as very young kids, we lose ourselves and we just kind of fit into this dogma of whatever we're told we have to do or whatever we're rewarded for or whatever gets us the girl or the boy or the parents' appreciation or, you know, favoritism or whatever these things are, right? And then some of us end up as adults and we just don't even know who the hell we are. And we like feel this emptiness inside, even though we've done all the things that everybody congratulated us for or pushed us to do or rewarded us for growing up. And then we have to kind of go back to those things in life. Like, who are we really to our core? Like, what really lights us up? What really is our passion? What really is our purpose, our mission, our focus for our life, and like the people that we serve and the mission that we're on. And so that's been a lot of the journey that I've been on the past few years, is uncovering that after realizing, okay, I love business. It's a huge passion of mine, but my intention for doing it was wrong. It was very fear driven, like, scarcity based, fear driven, trying to prove my worth, trying to afraid that I wasn't going to be able to take care of myself or things like that. And when I was able to shift it to being driven like from a place of love and from a place of passion and service and connection, and just wanting to create because I love the life that I've been given, and because I love the body I've been given and the mind I've been given, and the people that I get the opportunity to work with and serve, it shifted everything in the outcomes in my business. And I think that was like a bigger sales training for me than any sales training, and I think it's something that a lot of entrepreneurs miss, because they we're not taught that. Like, we're not taught to go out and have fun and dance and play and do the things you're passionate about and like be your authentic self. We're just taught to go make money, go do business, go be the best, like go be this brute force driver. And I think a lot of people miss out on a lot in life because they stick to that story that isn't necessarily the highest serving, although it can show up as high serving because externally you look successful.
Yeah, no, and it's identity stuff, right? Like, you started to have success in business, like your identity became, or I'm speaking for you, so I apologize, but often
that's true.
becomes,
Yeah.
well, she's this, awesome business lady, but then like, what if that's not serving you? Like, what if you're spending too much time on it? Or like, what is your end goal? Like, what do you want? Like, if you want to have $100 million in revenue or something, like, well, why? Because like, you're never going to be able to spend all that. So and it could be a good thing. It could be because like, I want all these, people are going to work for me to have this opportunity and da 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 da. But if it's just because like, that's
Vanity
the next thing to
metric,
get,
yeah.
and like, that's going to make me feel like now I'm, my identity's secure again. Because you keep moving up these like rungs in life too, and you're going to be compared to whoever's kind of like near you on whether I'm running, whether I'm like in business. I used to be maybe good with kids right out of college in real estate, but then like once you're an entrepreneur, it's like you're compared to these other, and so like if you keep comparing yourself to the people around you, you're always going to feel like you need to keep going. And there's nothing wrong with keeping going, but why? Like, I've thought about this. Like, there's actually something I heard from somebody else that I used to do a little bit, is like practice dying. Like, if you're on your deathbed and you look back on your life, like, what things would you be glad you did, and what things would you wish that you did differently? And like, that's a really sobering thing to think about, because and different things that belief systems you have will impact that too. Like, I used to be more kind of orthodox religion, so that had a stronger push towards like what I would do. Now a little bit less so it's a little bit more my own opinion. So like, dancing might not have fit into my old mindset, but in my mindset today, it's like, it's some of the best feelings I have in this short life I have. So like, I do want to lean into that, even if maybe it is frivolous or whatever. So I just think there are things that unfortunately a lot of people don't think about at all. Like, you just wake up and you go through your day and keep doing that until you die. But
Yeah.
there's a lot of like opportunities to stop and re-examine that. And I think that can lead to a lot of personal growth.
Yeah.
And I think it's, for me at the moment, I hope, helping business, because like I said, I have a lot of young people now working for me. I try to spend a lot of time with them. That's like where I feel like my time is best served, is either kind of out facing clients or with our people and like setting that culture. And I tell them all the time, I'm like, do something interesting, do something that stands out, say yes to things. Like, say yes to things would be one of my biggest pieces of advice right now, is because like, if you don't say yes, you're not going to have experiences, and they might go wrong, but you'll learn from it. If you don't do it at all, then like, you're not growing, you're not changing. And unfortunately, we live in a world where like everything wants you to keep narrowing in like who you are and what you believe and everything into like the same, instead of like continue to open it up to more and more, pieces of information that can like inform how you think, how you behave.
Yeah.
So I want more. Like, I want to go to Brooklyn nightclub because there's people who are nothing like me, different sexes, genders, it's like interests, income levels, all that stuff's in one place. And like I realized like I don't need to be big shot real estate guy to like have meaning in life.
Yeah, it's cool. I one of my first coaches I ever hired was an energetic intelligence coach, which I thought he was a business coach, which he is a business coach, but he teaches energetic intelligence, which was the catalyst that really kind of transformed that portion of my life and understand that my intentions were all wrong. And what you were just saying there is like, does it make you expansive and expand you? And so I think there's things in your life that everything in your life either makes you feel expansive or it makes you feel contracted. People, things, activities, businesses, specific tasks at your business. And he taught me to just start to have first the awareness of what made me feel expansive, what made me feel the green zone energy, like flow state energy, passion, love, service, joy, time goes fast, all those types of things. And then what makes you feel contracted, where you're stressed or overwhelmed or bored or frustrated or angry and anything in the spectrum there. And the more I started to lean into the things that made me feel expansive, whatever it was in my life, and lean away from the things that made me feel contracted, the more my life started to continue to expand with ease. And it became more effortless instead of feeling like I had to force every outcome that I wanted in my life and like battle everything. And I had the mindset that everything is hard, like everything good is hard. I think we all culturally, we believe that, like no pain, no gain.
Right.
And yes, things are hard, like just like working out a muscle at the gym, it's painful, but it feels good at the same time. And it's something that you are proud of. And I wouldn't really call that like pain and suffering. I mean, it's painful, but it's not suffering. And so that's the paradigm shift I've been trying to get through, is how much can I create in my life while staying in the green zone and staying expansive and continuing to be in this state of flow, and not having to believe that I have to suffer through it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think a lot of times it's like in life, there's something that's true, like, you know, hard work, no pain, no gain, or whatever. What doesn't kill me can only make me stronger. That have truth to them, but not like all the time, or you need them mixed with something else. And so like, I take that, you know, but then I read like, you know, Tim Ferriss's 40-hour work week or whatever. And it's like, four. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, 40.
400.
Only 40?
Yeah. No, and I was like, I enjoyed the book. I thought for me, like, this isn't me. Like, I don't want to just be on the beach every day. Like, I enjoy work and, you know, like putting in more hours and stuff. But there's inklings of truth, you know, to grasp from that and like mix in with this army, like hardcore thing. And so each person's got to pick and choose their own. Like one of the most life-changing things for me over the last 4 years is like moving to New York. I ride a bike everywhere. They have the city bikes, divvy lift bikes, where you like pick one up one place and then you drop it off somewhere else, so you don't have to like lock it or whatever. And everywhere I go, I ride a bike. And usually I go out to the Hudson River and I ride up and down. And it's so expansive versus like sitting in traffic, driving home from work. Or like I walk my kids to dance class. It's like 8 blocks away versus like getting in a car and like getting in traffic and getting irritated and all these different things. It's a small thing, but it's been like huge. Even when we talked about doing this today, and I know I originally was like, it's 3 hours away, like let's find another time. I thought about it, I'm like, well, I'm not gonna have any traffic from where I am to where you are, and I have my car that has like auto drive, so I can do, so it's like a more expansive thing. But if I would have had to drive like 3 hours in like gridiron traffic to do this, I probably would have said no, you know?
Right.
So.
I love that.
Yeah.
So shifting gears into some more of the technical and development stuff, I would love to hear, like, go into a little bit about, you know, how you have a competitive edge, like kind of why would people work with you over other developers out there, and how you've managed to build your team, which I believe you have 15 people on your team. So you guys are I would say a lean team organizationally, but that's still a good chunk of people for the amount of volume that you're doing. I mean, they must be a very highly efficient team and a very good team of A players. So yeah, I guess first onto the client perspective, like what sets Quattro Development, because you're co-founder and principal of Quattro Development. I can't even remember if I said that in the beginning. I hope I did. But what sets Quattro Development apart from other developers, and what has led to your growth in obtaining these tenant clients?
Yeah, it's funny answering the question and realizing like we haven't talked that much about real estate, but part of my answer is like a lot of the stuff we talked about is the answer to some of these questions. But I guess for one, our niche is, I think, a tremendous niche. So, unlike most developers who I think maybe have a vision of something that might work out, or they have trends and supply and demand data, and it's like, I'm going to build this, and I think I'm going to get this rent, and I'm going to, whatever. Like, it's kind of all based on hopes. We typically are like signing a lease with our tenants before we close on the acquisition of, if it's a piece of dirt that we're going to build on. So we know what the rent is, and it's usually a function of what our costs are. And so we even tell the tenant, hey, we'll do these developments. Your rent is going to be an open book thing. Like, here's our cost, and we need to make a certain amount of money. So like, and oftentimes the type of properties we sell are sold based on a cap rate, the return that investor is going to get for buying it. So if a Chipotle is paying $100,000 a year in rent and somebody gets a 5 cap, 100,000 divided by 0.05, it's $2 million value or whatever. So we'd say, well, we need like a 7% return on our cost because we're going to sell it to somebody at 5%, and the spread is what we make our money off of. So for one thing, like, we don't have a leasing risk. Like, what if we build this and nobody comes, and now we're paying our debt service and nobody ever comes, and when we finally put them in there, it's like for less, rent than we thought we were going to get. So it allows for decision making so much easier. It's like it works or it doesn't, and it's very transparent for the tenants. Like, we don't always do it that way. Some tenants just don't want to do it that way. They just want to know what the rent's going to be, and we do the same math. It's just we don't show it to them. Other ones, it's literally like, here it is. So if they say like, hey, that rent doesn't work, it doesn't work, and it's not like, oh, we'll sharpen our pencils, or, we will to an extent at times, but for the most part, it's like, this is what we've agreed to do, which I think tenants appreciate, because so often in real estate, it's the landlord and the tenant are like opposing sides to a problem, and what one wins, the other loses, right? But I don't think it has to be that way. Like, I think a tenant and the landlord in what we do is truly like a partnership. Like, you can't succeed in growing if we don't do what we're supposed to do, and we can't succeed if we don't have you. So like, let's find, it's cheesy, but like a win-win. And so I think just our model has helped us to not get out over our skis and do things that, we thought were going to work out that didn't. But it's also like created this ecosystem where I think tenants feel very comfortable and trustworthy. And I think that's another part of the success is, reputation, but what is reputation from? I mean, it can be like, when I go to ICSCs, because I do like the Insta story, different things, be like, oh, Rob the runner, the dancer, all these different things, like that could be the idea. But I think it's primarily based on like trust and integrity. And I can't think of anybody we work with that has a story they could say about me or us that was like, that was a unethical transaction or they weren't being honest. So yeah, just being truthful, telling when there's a problem, telling somebody about the problem, taking, if they're mad about it, they can be mad about it, and then you move on. You don't have to like start a war or fight over it. It's just kind of like things are what they are, and we're going to do what we can to fix them when there's problems. But that goes a long way. Like, when you're trying to then, again, not just build like one building for one tenant, move on to the next one. Like, the goal is like when we did the 50 Montessori schools, like, you got to have trust, and you can't break that trust. Once you break it, you're done. And then you have to have your employees do the same thing. So, the couple, I think we've maybe let go of like 2 people in our 16, 17 year history. And the one was primarily just like not that he didn't have integrity, it wasn't that at all, but just like that culture of how we deal with people. Like, hearing somebody yell at somebody on the phone, like, it's not what we do. We don't yell at people on the phone. Like, I get it, if you're mad, then like, go punch a punching bag or whatever, because once you start doing that, like, it just changes the whole culture of what the company is. But if everybody's doing things the same way, it goes a long way for building trust with the clients. And I think that's what we've done. And I think now more and more, as we've grown our people, and our people are a representation of us out in the marketplace, they're not copying me, but they're acting in a way, like, from a values and culture standpoint, that are similar. And so then it expands, and now more and more people like are incoming, like, hey, I'm a broker and I'm working with this tenant that needs a developer. Like, let's think of Quattro Development, or like whatever it is. So now we start to not just have to like me being out there getting the business. It's other people coming to us, or the younger guys we're working with, like making phone calls on our behalf. And maybe that tenant, calls around, like, what do you know about these people? And it's all positive. Like, we just had a meeting with Sprouts, the grocery store. And I drove in from Michigan to suburban Chicago for it. And, it was great. It was exactly what you want. heads of real estate for Sprouts are there, their brokers are there, and they're asking me a bunch of questions about like, can we really perform? Who are we? And the brokers all said they have a great reputation. I'm like, it's probably the number one key to success, I think, in what we do is if you can't get that from most people, then it's going to be hard to grow your business, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and I love the single tenant net lease space because it's such, in my opinion, I'm not a developer, but it's such low risk because you already have a tenant secured. The banks will finance it at a very, very high LTV. I mean, we have lenders up to 100% loan to cost on single tenant net lease buildings when the tenant's secured. And then, yeah, I mean, you're corporate guaranteed. So regardless of what happens in the market, you're most likely going to be fine because these are massive. Like McDonald's is backed by, you know, chubby Americans in any market. It's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And same with a lot of these other big brands, Chipotle and Chick-fil-A and all those. But yeah, I think that's super cool. And so I think I read somewhere that you guys structure your fees differently in the development process, or I guess how do you, like, what does it look like from the developer role? Like, what equity do you bring to the table? Because you're locking up the property, but are you bringing in equity partners to actually do the construction and the development, or like how do you structure that with your projects?
Yeah. So I mean, on the fee side of things, like historically, we have not put like fee income to us in our budgets. So where that comes into play is if, you know, let's say another developer is also offering to do the development open book, but they're saying I'll do it for an 8% return on cost, but they also have a 5% developer fee and a 1% acquisition fee and a 1% disposition fee that are all going to them. I mean, that's great for them, but that means the rent is going to be significantly higher than if I say 8%, I don't have those fees in my budget. As we grow, I think we are seeing we need to have some cash flow like that, you know, coming in, but again, being transparent with it, having it be a very reasonable amount, it's not hiding it. But a lot of developers make their money off of fee income as their primary like source of income. So if the project makes it or doesn't, they're making their money. You know, I'm going to do a $100 million project and I'm going to get my 3% developer fee and then an asset management fee. But if, you know, my equity partner loses all their money, like it might not impact me at all. Or if I have a equity co-invest, it's like a small, like maybe my fees are more than I end up losing. We make our money primarily on the profitability of the project. So like the back end promote if we're, and to answer your question more directly, you know, we've done some projects with our own equity. The majority have been with outside equity, whether it's the guys I mentioned earlier who did like 45 high net worth individuals. Most recently, we did a friends and family fund, which was, I think the update went out today. I've been working on it for like 4 months. But that was interesting. I mean, I went down to as small as like a $25,000 check so that like my cousins could invest and, you know, because we're making returns that are just much better than you can get in like the stock market. And you know, I feel bad that I can make it for some high net worth people that I just met, but you know, my parents or somebody, you know, different people we work with don't get it. So that was the point of that. And I think it's been well received. We've used most of the money. We haven't returned it all yet.
Is that a close-ended fund?
Yeah. So we raised like 14 million. We called it in 25% increments. We started paying like a pref on it from when the money came in. And then as the properties sell, we're returning the capital and profit on each project. So
what do you pay? What's your structure? Is it like an 8 pref plus a split or some sort of pref
it
plus
was
a split or just straight equity?
It was a 9 pref and then a 50-50 back end split of the profit.
Okay.
So,
cool.
And when I say that, it's interesting because on bigger projects, you know, a developer might only be getting like a 20% back end split. And sometimes I run into that when I'm talking about it, like, oh, this company was doing 80-20, 80 to the investors. But I'm like, yeah, but their project was like, you know, buying 100 acres and building a spec industrial building that they don't know. You know, like I'm coming to you and saying like, this is very like tied up of what, you know, you're getting. Like, so oftentimes, you know, historically, I think our IRRs to that individual I mentioned earlier was like 40, 50, 60%, you know.
Really?
Like yeah. So if I'm giving them 50, I'm getting 50, but they're still getting that. That's a lot better than if I'm giving them 80, but they're only getting a 20% IRR. So,
Are
you know,
you still getting that high of IRR in this market?
Yeah. So the fund, and to touch on like, you know, you mentioned the single tenant net lease, how a lot of these, like a lot can't go wrong.
I'll invest with you if you're getting 50% IRR. That's insane.
Yeah. Hey, you know, but the 3 things that can really go wrong are cap rate changes, which is a macroeconomic thing you really can't control. So over the last, you know, we've raised the fund, I think like I went out to raise the Friends and Family Fund the week that like Signature Bank failed and everything. So from there, like rates, it was right around then when rates went up. So cap rates have gone up, and you can't really control that. Ideally, if your project's only taking like a year, how much are they really going to run? And if you're getting 200 basis point spread, there's no way that cap rates should run 200 basis points where you're underwater just on that. Then there's the construction risk. I mean, some of these projects, when they're open book, will have like, hey, up to 5% overage they'll pay rent on or something. But if you're over that, then it's like on you. So, we had a oil change facility where we did a phase 2 and it didn't show anything. And then we found like a leaky tank and it cost us $200,000. And like that was all the profit on that project. So there's still risk there. And then tenant risk. So if we're doing a Chipotle deal, we're going to require a lesser return on cost to us than if we're doing, like, we just signed up a primary care, value-based primary care provider client that has like 11 locations. And so we're going to need a higher, rate of return because I'm taking more risk than if I'm doing Chipotle. So with the Montessori school is a great example. We did the 50 of them, and they were a credit risk. Like, they weren't making money. They had a great model, but they recently closed a bunch of their schools, and that was part of the risk. But we were doing those for like a 9% return on cost when maybe we were doing Chipotle for 7.5 or 8, something like that. But so those 3 areas where you can still lose money. So with the fund, we kind of had all of them go against us with all the cost overruns, not just because of like post-COVID, it's, everything's been so much more expensive. Interest rates went up significantly. And then we had one tenant issue in the fund. But I think we'll still be north of like a 20% IRR on it, which I think is still
really
good.
good. Yeah. That's cool. What do you think? What's your idea of the outlook of the real estate? I mean, I guess the overall economy, but specifically the commercial real estate market in the near and, like, I guess, short term and then longer term, like maybe over the next 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an economist, but I think about it a lot. I think that there's so much money. Like, the people who have money are just getting more and more money. Like, there's
a big gap.
Yeah, and you're right. And I think that's why
gap,
the stock market keeps going up. People are like, it's a profits, this and that. Yes, partially, but it's a supply and demand thing. You have a lot of money, supply of money, like it's demanding a limited amount of stocks. And, you've seen it with housing too. I know, like, with rates being higher, like, it's caused that to slow down a little bit, but I think that picks back up because there's just too much money chasing assets.
Yeah.
So on that side of it, I feel kind of bullish. I think rates, while they might not go down tremendously, I don't see them going up. Just, again, like, there's a lot of money that wants to buy bonds, like 10-year treasuries. Like, maybe they're not buying them now, but like over time. I think the problem is more like for the people who don't have assets, everything else is still going up, too, like food and stuff like that. So if you're a client of ours, I could see the picture being more like challenging. If you're selling $12 lunches, like, are there going to be people that are going to stop being able to afford that, and could that cause pressure on, like, the companies? That's where I'm like more concerned. I feel pretty good about like the real estate market. We just went through the worst that I've seen since back in 2008 or 9. For people who aren't in real estate, it doesn't really feel like it because the economy's been fine. But a lot, like, I remember moving to New York and then reading all these articles about all these billionaire families that just lost this building, this building, this building. I'm thinking to myself, like, oh, this is one of those periods where somebody's gonna snap these up, and then, like, you're gonna look back 10 years from now and be like, wow, but we're coming out of that. So I would imagine we have like a real estate cycle on the mend ahead of us rather than like hopefully another downturn, even if the like macro economy struggles, which I could see.
Yeah, because the past few years about now in commercial real estate have been pretty tough.
Yeah.
And I think hopefully we've hit bottom. But I mean, there's still quite a bit of commercial debt maturing this year. I think it was like 1.2 trillion was for 2025, and estimated 25% of that was distressed debt, or either had to be modified, extended again, or defaulted and sold. So, but with that comes opportunity because prices were insane and everything was so expensive. There had to be some give for us to be able to ride it back up.
No, and I think people expected things to come down a lot more, other than office. Like, that was the one place where you really saw stuff that seemed like it was an absolute steal from like the cost to replace it versus what you're paying. And I mean, I think you're seeing now, like, I just read New York had the highest foot traffic in their offices. Like, it's greater than in 2019. So for all the, drama about people never coming back to the office, like, in New York City is more today than it was pre-pandemic, which is crazy.
That
Given the
is
valuation
crazy.
changes that you've seen, like,
Yeah.
I don't know, something seems like it doesn't make sense. I think,
Maybe
Yeah.
is like Class A office. Like people want all the new
Yeah.
amenities that are common now. I don't know. I think the going to work in a dungy office that feels like a hospital with,
Right.
those horrible lights and panels and I don't know. I think people just want more like a little bit brighter and nicer and better energy
Yeah.
offices with more amenities. But anyway, what about your team? How have you been able to build your team? You've got 15 people on your team, and I know that's challenging to not only do what you're doing, but then also lead a team and recruit people, retain people. So what has worked well for you in building your team and culture and just your operating system for your business?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, to throw on top of it, like I lived in Chicago for 16, 17 years up until 2020. I got this crazy idea to build a house in Panama and move my family down there to get away from the Chicago winters. And so I was like 3 or 4 months away from like the whole national work from wherever you want scene. But I got stuck in Panama when COVID hit, and that's a whole nother long story. But when I came back, I moved out to California for 6 months, and then I moved to New York, and I've been in New York for 4 years. And my point of saying all this is that everybody else pretty much is in the Chicagoland area. So I'm not only like growing the team, but I'm growing it without being physically present with them most of the time. The guys who work for us, the people who work for us, I think see something special about us and the company versus other companies. And they're really excited. We give a lot of big leash, a lot of autonomy to figure things out. It's not for somebody who's like wants to be told exactly what to do every day. Although even like within our company, we found, hey, there's some people maybe on the front end where you really got to just figure out like what my day looks like what properties I'm going to call, how I'm going to canvas or cold call. People who aren't as good at that can move into like maybe the due diligence and entitlement side. That's a little bit more like, all right, this is what it takes, like put together a schedule and do this and that. So like identifying people's strengths and getting them in the right seat, treating them well, like everybody gets some percentage of ownership in every project we do, even if it's very small. So being motivated by pay that is because the company is making money, not just like here's 2% every year or whatever. And like at the same time, like we usually kind of freeze like income, like salaries at a point where it's like, hey, if you want to do really well, the company's got to do really well. And so we've never, like I said, we've only let go of 2 people. I think it's been stable. We've never had somebody leave our company. So that tenure helps a lot.
Awesome.
Like if you have somebody come for a year or 2, you're mostly just giving, like you
Yeah.
really got to get to like that year or 2 before they start like giving back. So one of my young guys just moved to New York. I'm very excited about it. He's 26, I think, and fresh in New York City. So it's fun to have him nearby, but like allowing things like that, I was like, I
Yeah.
don't know, whatever you want to do. We got another guy just moved to Philly, like good for him. And then
Do you guys
yeah.
work? Oh, go ahead.
No,
Sorry.
please.
I was do you work remotely or does everyone go to an office? I know you're remote.
Yeah,
But
most of them will go to the office at least a few days a week. Obviously not the guy in Philly because he's on his own, and now us in New York. But even in New York, like we're getting together on Wednesdays I'm a member of this like club thing called the Ned Club, so we can go there and work, like have a space to work. But yeah, most of them go there. Every Monday we have a construction call with everybody, a Zoom call. When I come back in town, like I was in the office 2 weeks ago, we went out, got beers and just talked and tried to like make sure there's kind of camaraderie. I think everybody generally gets along. So yeah, I think it's just important. That's it. Like, let them figure it out. Provide assistance as needed. Be humble. I never make it where like I used to remember going to the owner of the company. Like you had to kind of figure out was he in a good mood today or not. If I was going to ask for something, it's like don't be like that. Just pick up the phone and call me if you want to talk to me. You want to talk about something. Like very approachable. So yeah, and then just like we have people who have really good attention to detail. It's not always me, but like our head of construction is a civil engineer, very detail oriented. I ask him to like pull up an email from 6 years ago. He's got it like in a certain folder, like subfolder, and like it's amazing. I don't know if that answers the question, but
Yeah.
those things come to mind.
no, that's awesome. And we're gonna wrap up here. We've 9 more minutes left, but you mentioned earlier, and then I also read about you. You met your wife volunteering at a homeless shelter. back in your 20s, and then now I believe you're a part of First Chance. Is that?
First Chance is dated, but
Okay.
I can talk about that.
Yeah. So I love, because part of my mission is to, donate a percentage of profits of the company to help teach entrepreneurship, emotional intelligence, give mentors to younger kids that are, don't have the resources or the education to necessarily learn about a lot of the things I think are most important in life. And yeah, so I love that you are big into philanthropy and giving back, and sounds like you've been that way for a very long time. So we'd love to just kind of hear that story.
Yeah. So just starting like with First Chance, it was coming out of, and it ties into the Jim Clayton story from earlier because, as I mentioned, he was a not-for-profit bank. When we finally got our 3 loans done with him, I sent him a letter asking him to give money to First Chance, and he donated $15,000, which was probably about what our loan fees were. So it was like a pretty cool transaction. But yeah, the idea was just, and this is something I continue to work on recently with another program that got kind of taken into another one. But commercial real estate you really have to know somebody to get into it. It doesn't mean you have to know them forever, but like you need some sort of introduction. And so when I moved to Chicago, I just felt like I needed to, and part of it was like religious things that like I took serious about, like the Bible, like Sermon on the Mount, helping people and stuff. But I just saw a ton of poverty. Like driving to my office, like I'd go through a neighborhood that was one of the more like violent kind of poverty-stricken neighborhoods every day. And so like I remember early on, on a Saturday morning, I bought a bunch of coffee and donuts and literally just like found people on the street and gave them to them. And well, it's 2 part. First Chance, what we did was we raised money to take kids from, I don't like any of the words to describe, usually like underprivileged or whatever.
Yeah.
But I'll use the word underprivileged for the time being.
Yeah.
Kids who didn't have parents, a lot of money, a lot of support, and send them on either study or volunteer abroad programs. So like part of what I did, there was a YMCA World Camp that was in Prague, and we took 3 kids there. It was actually my first week of my honeymoon, so my wife and I were like volunteering at this camp during our honeymoon. But these 3 kids who never left Chicago got to go to another country and experience something different.
Yeah.
And then with the World Camp part, they got to meet kids from all over the world. More recently, we were working with just the idea of like, how do you get some kids who might have grown up on the west side or south side of Chicago, or every neighborhood, every city has these neighborhoods that just don't have the connectivity to the downtown skyscrapers and like knowing these people in their white collar jobs. So how do we expose kids in high school in a poor neighborhood to commercial real estate? And then how could we maybe get them into a college that recognizes they might have some shortcomings coming into college, but like helping and giving them maybe a mentor who's in real estate so they know about it? Because like I guarantee 90% of the population, if not more, doesn't know what commercial real estate really is. Like they don't think when they're driving down the road or going to McDonald's that, oh, there was somebody put this thing together, like somebody built it, somebody bought the land, somebody designed it, somebody got it permitted, somebody at the city worked, there's all these things that are involved. So just trying to raise awareness around that. But then, yeah, like I started helping at this women's shelter, and then I became kind of the lead, and I'd get a group of like 10 to 30 people it was one Monday a month, and we go into this neighborhood and serve a meal, which was whatever. But what I got more out of is I go and eat with the women and hear their stories. And it really changes what you think about like homelessness and a lot of these problems. Because I think, it's very easy to, especially if you're fed a certain mindset about it, it's like somehow these people's fault. And you hear story after story, especially with women in these situations, like it's usually not their fault. They get her beaten or just crazy things. Like this woman was abducted, put in a trunk, and like left to die, and then somehow like got to this shelter. So, and then I made friendships with some of these ladies. Like one I just visited 2 weeks ago. This other one I was telling you about, she passed away. You want to solve all the world's problems, and then it becomes overwhelming because like, how do you really move the needle forward? How much money do I need? How much time do I need? But like, you can do little things, one person at a time. I started mentoring at a YMCA that had like a big brother, big sister program, because I was going out drinking like too many nights a week. And so I just like, I need to put something else in my schedule that I can just point to, like I can't go. So I started doing that. Mentored a kid from when he was like 8 to now he's probably like in his late 20s in the Navy. There's another kid that I just was getting together with in Chicago the other week. So it just, part of it's for my own inner growth of like not only being surrounded by people who think and are experiencing the same thing as me to give a different perspective. And then part of it's obviously like wanting to hopefully help make other people's lives better. We actually had a Quattro Impact set up, and it was like every time we sold a project, we were putting 10% of the profits into Impact, and then Impact was investing alongside our Quattro projects, and then the profits from that we were giving away. And
That's
I
really
loved it.
cool.
Yeah, I love it. I want to get that going again. It's just like when cash flow gets tight,
Yeah.
it can be easy to like, now's not the time for that. But yeah, I'm a big believer in like so much of what ends up happening in your life is in your control and so much isn't. And there's a lot of people who could have done everything right, and unfortunately it didn't work out for them anyway. So I think having like the heart towards helping people rather than trying to keep it all for yourself just leads to a more happy life. So.
Me too. That's what it's all about. It's just living the best life we can and helping other people do the same. And well, thank you so much. It's been great to get to know you, and I'm excited to get to know you more and see where the rest of your journey leads.
Thank you. It's been fun.
Thank you.